The Giraffe tank. The untold story of a light tank M3A1 in Soviet hands. Hey everyone, if you're into epic stories about tanks, military history, and the tech that shaped World War II, make sure to subscribe to the channel and drop your comments below. Your thoughts fuel more awesome content like this. Picture this. It's 1942 and World War II is raging. The United States, fresh off the shock of Pearl Harbor, is gearing up to support its allies against Nazi Germany. Across the ocean, the Soviet Union is locked in a brutal fight, and the U.S. is sending aid through the Lend-Lease program. Enter the light tank M3A1, a scrappy little tank that became a surprising hero. The Soviets, with their knack for colorful nicknames, called it the Giraffe tank because its cramped turret made gunners stretch their necks like, well, giraffes. This tank wasn't perfect, but it packed a punch with its cutting-edge gyroscopic stabilizer and played a key role in the Allied effort. This story isn't just about steel and tracks. It's about how American ingenuity, industrial might, and teamwork with allies helped turn the tide of war. I'll take you through the tank's journey from U.S. factories to Soviet testing grounds, dive into its strengths and flaws, and explore its economic impact. Plus, I'll share my thoughts on why this tank matters and how it reflects the American spirit of getting things done. Buckle up for a wild ride through history. Chapter 1. America's Industrial Awakening. When World War II kicked off in 1939, America's tank industry was, to put it bluntly, a bit of a snooze. The U.S. Army had a tight budget, and tanks weren't exactly rolling off assembly lines. Compared to the Soviet Union's T-34 or Germany's Panzer juggernauts, America was playing catch-up. But everything changed when the war hit home. By 1941, the U.S. was ready to flex its industrial muscle. Enter the light tank M3, the predecessor to the M3A1. By spring 1941, factories like American Car and Foundry in Barrack, Pennsylvania, were cranking out these machines. In August that year, they celebrated the 1,000th M3 rolling off the line, a huge milestone. By the end of 1941, American factories weren't just supplying the U.S. Army. They were churning out tanks for allies like Britain and the Soviet Union through Lend-Lease. Britain alone got 5,473 M3 tanks, which they dubbed Stuart after a Civil War general. For the Brits, whose own light tanks were a flop, these were godsend. The M3A1, an upgraded version, came later with bells and whistles like a gyroscopic stabilizer and a hydraulic turret drive. It was a symbol of America stepping up, proving it could build fast, reliable tanks to support the war effort. But how did this tank fare when it crossed the ocean to the Soviet Union? Let's find out. Chapter 2. Lend-Lease and the Soviet Connection. The Soviet Union wasn't as desperate for light tanks as Britain. They had their T-60 and T-70, which got the job done, even if they weren't world beaters. Still, extra tanks were always welcome in the brutal fight against Germany. Through Lend-Lease, the U.S. sent 1,676 M3 series tanks to the Soviets, with 1,232 making it to their destination. That's a lot of steel crossing the Arctic in perilous convoys. Most of these were the base M3 model, but by 1942, the M3A1 started arriving. Soviet testers were impressed. Compared to their T-70 and T-60, the M3A1 was faster, had better visibility, and packed more firepower with its 37mm gun. It wasn't perfect. Soviet crews had some gripes, but it earned respect. To understand why, let's dive into the dramatic arrival of these tanks in the Soviet Union. Chapter 3. The Arctic Gauntlet and the Giraffe tank's arrival. In November 1942, a convoy codenamed FB braved the icy Arctic waters to deliver supplies to the Soviet port of Murmansk. It was a brutal journey. Of 23 transport ships, only 5 made it. 3 turned back, sunk by German forces, and 1 was damaged. Among the cargo on those surviving ships were the first M3A1 tanks to reach Soviet soil. One of these tanks, serial number 6107, registration USA W301,174,003, became the star of Soviet trials. Built by American Car and Foundry in July 1942, it was a standard M3A1, complete with improved periscopes. No more crude plugs like early models, and a partially welded hull for extra strength. This tank was sent to the Kubinka proving ground near Moscow, where Soviet engineers and crews put it through its paces. What they found was a mix of innovation and frustration. Let's break it down. Chapter 4. Testing the Giraffe tank at Kubinka. From December 1942 to February 1943, the M3A1 was tested rigorously at Kubinka. It covered 929 kilometers over highways, dirt roads, and rough terrain. Soviet testers checked everything: speed, fuel efficiency, armament, and crew comfort, or lack thereof. Here's what they discovered. The cramped cockpit. Why Giraffe tank? The M3A1's turret was a nightmare for Soviet crews. The new under-turret basket, meant to make life easier, actually made things worse. A bulky drive shaft from the engine to the transmission ran through the tank, forcing the basket to be shallow. Gunners and loaders were crammed in, sitting in what testers called embryo-like positions, especially brutal in winter when crews wore bulky coats. The nickname Giraffe tank came from the telescopic M5A1 sight, which was so awkwardly placed that gunners needed impossibly long necks to use it effectively. The only workaround was the M4 periscopic sight, but even that didn't provide full 360-degree visibility. The commander, who doubled as the gunner in Soviet crews, could only see 135 degrees through the M6 periscope. Accessing the paired machine gun was a hassle, and the ammo stowage, while larger than the M3's, was so poorly laid out that reloading often required the whole crew's help. It was a design flaw that frustrated testers to no end. The game changer, gyroscopic stabilizer. The M3A1 standout feature was its Westinghouse electric gyroscopic stabilizer for the 37mm M6 gun. Soviet testers ran firing trials both stationary and at 15 kilometers per hour. Without the stabilizer, aiming on the move was nearly impossible, with a firing rate of just 3.5 shots per minute. But with the stabilizer on, the tank could fire 5 to 6 rounds per minute with improved accuracy. For a light tank in 1942, this was revolutionary, and Soviet testers gave it high marks. Road tests. Speed, fuel, and spurs. The M3A1 was a speedster on highways, hitting 60.8 kilometers per hour. But when testers added spurs, metal cleats to improve traction on rough terrain, speed dropped to 39.6 kilometers per hour, and fuel consumption skyrocketed. Without spurs, it used 130 liters per 100 kilometers on highways. With spurs, that jumped to 184 liters. Off-road, the tanks struggled without spurs, once getting stuck in a ditch due to poor traction. Adding spurs helped, but it slashed the range to just 63 kilometers on rough terrain. Testers experimented with fewer spurs to balance traction and comfort. 5 spurs per track reduced shaking, which was so bad it tired crews, messed with aiming, and damaged internal wiring. But fewer spurs meant weaker grip, and the spur mounts often broke under stress. The verdict? Spurs were a must for off-road, but they came at a cost. Chapter 5. The economic powerhouse behind the tank. To really get why the M3A1 mattered, let's talk economics. The Lend-Lease program wasn't just about goodwill. It was a massive boost for the U.S. economy. After the Great Depression, American factories were hungry for work. Lend-Lease, launched in 1941, pumped roughly $50 billion in 1940s money into the war effort, with $11 billion going to the Soviet Union. Tanks like the M3A1 were a small but vital part of that. Each M3A1 cost about $35,000 to build, cheap compared to the $50,000 M4 Sherman. This affordability let factories like American Car and Foundry produce 1,140 M3A1 tanks in just July and August 1942. That kind of output created jobs, revived industrial towns, and cemented America's role as the arsenal of democracy. The M3A1 wasn't just a tank. It was a symbol of American industry roaring to life. Chapter 6. The Giraffe Tank in Combat. Despite its quirks, the M3A1 held its own on Soviet battlefields. It fought in the North Caucasus, the South Ozerika Landing, the epic Battle of Kursk, and even in Crimea in spring 1944. It wasn't as common as the M3, so it's less prominent in war footage, but proved its worth. The tank's speed and stabilizer made it a nimble fighter, even if its cramped interior drove crews nuts. The test tank from Kubinka, serial number 6107, got lucky. It stayed at the proving ground, later joining the museum at Kubinka, and now residing in the Patriot Park near Moscow. It's marked with the insignia of the 258th Independent Tank Battalion from September 1942, though that's a bit of poetic license. Those units mostly used M3s. Still, by late 1942, M3A1s were arriving, so it's not far-fetched. Chapter 7. Reflections on a Tank's Legacy. The M3A1 story is bigger than just a machine. It's about America stepping up when the world needed it most. Lend-Lease showed how the U.S. could rally its factories, workers, and engineers to support allies thousands of miles away. The tank's flaws, like its cramped turret, taught designers that crew comfort matters as much as firepower. Its gyroscopic stabilizer was a glimpse into the future, paving the way for advanced targeting systems in later tanks. To me, the M3A1 is a reminder of what America does best: innovate, adapt, and deliver. It wasn't perfect, but it got the job done when it counted. It's also a lesson in teamwork between nations, industries, and soldiers. Today, we can look at that tank in a museum and see not just metal, but the spirit of a nation that rose to the challenge. Conclusion: honoring the Giraffe tank. The light tank M3A1, or the Giraffe tank, wasn't a flawless war machine. Its cramped turret and tricky sights drove Soviet crews up the wall, but its speed, reliability, and groundbreaking stabilizer made it a valuable asset. It fought across Soviet battlefields, helped win key battles, and showed what American engineering could do under pressure. As you stand in front of that M3A1 at Patriot Park, or imagine it from afar, think about the workers who built it, the sailors who braved Arctic convoys to deliver it, and the soldiers who fought in it. This tank is a piece of history, a testament to the power of unity and determination. Let's keep telling these stories to honor those who made victory possible. Call to action. If you love this deep dive into the M3A1, hit that subscribe button. Drop a comment below. Tell me what you think about this tank, or what other World War II stories you want to hear. Your feedback keeps the history alive.